Hi, I'm Josh McDonald.
And I'm Miranda Materi, and we are Hand Therapy Academy.
Let's chat a little bit about getting your CHT, but maybe in a different scenario, like as a seasoned therapist. So maybe a therapist who's been doing it for longer, maybe your work told you you have to get it, or you've just been kind of like dealing with family and kids, and now it's finally time. What are some tips we might have for that seasoned therapist trying to get their CHT?
Yeah, I think this is a good one because I think we mentor a lot of people that are kind of at both ends of the spectrum. And I think when someone's been out of school for a while, it's different, right? You have a different mindset, you study differently. But if you are fresh out of school, I think it's honestly a little bit easier. So it's understanding those study habits and things like that. So I think to start, and then there's the whole technology thing too, right? As an older therapist, if your generation X or whatever, you may not be as savvy to some of like the online platforms and like the online testing. So sometimes it's just that initial learning curve of doing technology as well in a different way.
Yeah, yeah. The new study methods that people are using and encouraging are online flashcards and online courses, and that's not the way I learned how to learn. I'm old enough. I used paper flashcards that were two-sided. I had these decks all over the place, and I had books I was just flipping through at the beach or whatever. So I was doing a very analog version of studying, and so it's helpful. Those newer technologically based things can be super helpful, but do what works for you. If it's not something that you're comfortable navigating, then stick to what works for you.
Yeah, that's true. And then it's also so I think if I was starting to study for something new as a experienced therapist, I would also try to really think about what my learning style is and how I can best match that. Like you said, I already kind of know, I think you feel like you already know yours, so you know what works for you, so you would continue to do that, which I would definitely recommend, but sometimes people don't know either, right?
Yeah, and it's been so long maybe since you had to study for a test. It's been so long since you had to like buckle down and spend an hour or two by yourself in a room or in a coffee shop kind of going through materials like how do I even do this anymore? So it may take some kind of like relearning like how do I want it? And it may not be the same as it used to be, so kind of getting used to that again.
Yeah, and another tip I would recommend is be a part of a group, a study group, where you may be studying with different individuals, so you can pick up different tips and pointers, and you probably have some great insight for them as well, especially if you have a lot of clinical experience.
Yeah, it's learning from others, but it's also accountability. Because as a seasoned therapist, you probably have more going on in life than someone who's maybe newer out of school, maybe doesn't have kids yet. So it's that accountability to say, like, I've got people asking if I went through that section or if I covered that content. So that's a useful thing too for that population.
Yeah, definitely. And then as an experienced therapist, I'd probably really try to rely on my clinical knowledge and my clinical experience to bring that in. So I think remembering cases like, oh, if a patient had a scapholunate tear, I would remember, oh, I remember they got that by they had their wrist twisted during a flag football game. So, remembering some patient scenarios, because you probably have a wealth of them, and how that injury occurred. You can pull a lot from your clinical experience, as opposed to doing like root memorization of rehab of the hand.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I would encourage the seasoned therapist to not underestimate the test. We have patient or members who will say like, "Oh, I've been a therapist for 10 years. I've been doing this. I do it every day, and so I really don't think I need to study that much." And I'd say the things you do in practice might not be the same as what you would answer on a test because your referring doctor asks for something different. Or maybe they're going to cover things you don't see at all. Maybe they're going to go over shoulder and scleroderma and lymphedema and pediatrics, and you're going to get a bunch of questions on a topic you have no idea on. So I would still give a good amount of time to studying. It's good refresher things, but it's also how they ask those questions on the test. It's good to have exposure to the content they're going to quiz you on. You may be a great therapist, but it's not the same answer that you would do in the clinic.
Yeah, and there is questions like you're like, well, I would never really need that in clinical practice. Like, what type of sensory receptor, right? That's a very fair question for the exam, and that's not something that you're saying. Oh, it's the Pacinian corpuscle that senses vibration. It's not like thinking that way as a clinician.
Yeah, yeah.
At least
And
most.
and brachial plexus. Like I can't remember the last time I needed to know the brachial plexus for a clinic situation, but you got to know it for the test. You got to know all that stuff, and so making sure all of those like factoids are in your brain and ready for it, those are important things for that therapist that says, maybe I've been doing this long enough, I'm probably good. Like, don't underestimate it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then I think from working with the different therapists, I remember working with one and her work made her get her CHT, which made her very upset, right? So she's like, that's so silly. I've been a therapist working for you for 10 years. You never required it before, and now all of a sudden you're requiring it. So there was a certain amount of, like, I think, resentment too that made
Sure.
studying uh probably not as enjoyable, or it was done out of a place of anger as opposed to something that she really wanted to do. So I would just make sure you're in a good headspace where it is something that aligns with what you want to do and why you're doing it.
Yeah, that finding your why. Like, it's important for everybody taking the test, because it's something that for months and months is going to require a lot of your time. You have to have a good motivation behind it. And so if maybe the initial cause for the test is a cruddy one, but you can say, you know what, this is a good thing for me to do. It's going to advance my knowledge. It's going to establish, that I know what I'm talking about. It's going to give some validity to what I'm doing. Like, making a positive why behind it. We don't always have to just let that organically happen. We can create a good why for doing this big, long, giant project. But you're right, being in a good headspace when you're doing it, or it's not going to stick. You're just going to be regretting the whole thing all the way through.
Right, making it a positive experience.
Yeah, yeah. And seeing it, we say this a lot when we kind of wrap up our 6-month group. Each time we talk about passing or not passing does not define who you are as a person or as a therapist. This therapist that Miranda's talking about, she passed on her first time taking it. She was fantastic. She was a great therapist. But you may struggle with test taking. It's maybe there may be other variables that made you not pass, but that doesn't mean that you're not a good therapist, and not letting an unfortunate outcome make you second guess your qualities as a therapist.
Yeah, definitely. And know that you're going to be better off by going through the study process, right? Like, we all are. I think Josh and I still get questions. We're like, we need to look that up or look into it. And we're still learning,
Yeah.
even though we teach this stuff all the time. It's such, I think being a hand therapist is such a beautiful thing because you're always learning and growing. And I think that's what makes this chosen profession so great.
Yeah, yeah. And we can always be better therapists, and getting exposed to that stuff makes us better therapists. Yeah,
And it makes you more excited about your career, right? You're like, oh, I learned this and I want to try this. It's just something that gives light into your field and gives energy into your practice.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. If you let it, if you find a positive why behind it, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah, you gotta let it. That's true.
yeah. I did think of another tip that goes back to that experienced therapist. When you study, rely on the same study tools that the younger therapists are studying from, rehab of the hand, some of the online resources, Hand Therapy Academy stuff, as opposed to going to journal articles. We've known some therapists that studied by going to journal articles, which is a great way to learn new information, but that's not what the test is testing you on. The test is testing you on foundational knowledge and things that are well established. And so you may read an article that says, hey, this is a whole new way to do lateral elbow tendinopathy care, but that's not the questions that are going to be on the test that was written years ago. Like, it's studying the same materials, even like, oh, I know all that stuff. Refresh your memory on those things. Don't get lost in journal articles that can go a million different directions.
That's true. Because there might be, 20 other articles that say something different. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And they're not going to test you on things that just came out 2 months ago. That's not how the test works.
right. Right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
definitely true.
Yeah.
Even though it's exciting to look at new journals. But
I love it. It's I get teased from my staff all the time because that's what I do on an airplane. I take with me the most recent journals that I've gotten, and I just work through those on an airplane. And the time passes. I love reading journals, but that's not how to study for the exam.
yeah, that's not what you want, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Well, there's all kinds of different tips and materials out there. Definitely try to take advantage of the things out there. That's what we're here for. Our whole platform is all about studying for and passing the exam. So if you have any questions or need any advice or direction, feel free to reach out to us. You can find us on social media at Hand Therapy Academy, or our email info@handtherapyacademy.com.